He had everything, but chose emptiness. There was no lack of bread, no lack of home, no lack of affection. The Father loved him. The home was stable, the table was abundant, but inside him something began to eat away at the silence. A restlessness disguised as freedom, a hunger not for food, but for control. What if the greatest pain isn't losing everything, but betraying the one who loved you most? What if rock bottom is the only place where the Father's voice echoes? Jesus told this story to a divided audience. On one side, the Pharisees, guardians of outward obedience. On the other, sinners, men and women who knew what it meant to be lost on the inside. And there, in that contrast, he revealed one of the most intimate parables in the gospel, the portrait of a love that waits, even when it's rejected. Today, we're going to dive into the most personal story Jesus ever told and discover why the return of the prodigal son isn't about the mistake, but about a father who never stopped waiting. This isn't a story about ordinary rebellion. It's a story about us, about those who've drifted away from God, not out of hatred, but out of a thirst for autonomy, about those who've tried to find redemption far from the source. Luke 15 describes the exact moment when the younger son stands up and says to his father, "Give me the portion of goods that falls to me." But he wasn't just asking for money. He was saying, in other words, "I prefer what's yours without needing you." And the father, in silence, gives. The word used is bios, life. The father didn't just give an inheritance. He gave part of himself. He gave what sustained the household. He gave space without abandoning love. There's no record of a farewell, no embrace, no kiss, no final advice, just a son leaving and a father who stays. That silence carries the weight of a divine mercy that refuses to control. The father knew what was coming, but he let him go. Because sometimes repentance isn't born from reprimand. It's born from misused freedom and the pain it brings. The son wanted to experience the world, but he didn't yet know that outside the presence, everything falls apart. The inheritance becomes a burden, the soul burns, and the distance from the Father begins to suffocate. But the story is only just beginning. And with every step away from home, without the son realizing, he was being led back to what he had tried to forget, the spiritual restoration that only love can bring. He left as one who believes the world is waiting with open arms, with the inheritance in his hands, eyes shining, and a future without rules laid out before his feet. But freedom without purpose is the beginning of every fall. The biblical text simply says he went to a distant country. Jesus doesn't name the place, because true exile has no geography. It's marked by absence. It's the place where the Father's voice is no longer heard, where the blessing received becomes disconnected from the source. He wanted to live intensely, and he did. But what started as a celebration quickly turned into waste. Everything he thought he controlled was silently controlling him. Women, wine, fake laughter, crowded tables. On the surface, it seemed like he had won, until the money ran out, and with it, the friends. It wasn't just financial bankruptcy, it was a spiritual rupture. He didn't just lose his possessions, he lost his name, his honor, his sense of purpose. The prodigal son was now no one. A great famine came upon that region, and then he did something unthinkable for a Jew. He agreed to take care of pigs. Jesus knew exactly what he was saying. Pigs were unclean animals. Touching them meant straying even further from ritual purity. But the prodigal son was no longer seeking purity. He was seeking survival. In the mud, among the animals, he longed to eat what the pigs were eating, but even that was denied him. The one who once had bread at home now begged for scraps. The blessing had turned into a burden, and the freedom he had longed for now held him captive. Because the greatest prison is the one we choose, thinking we're finding freedom. It was there, in the silence of humiliation, that something began to stir. Not in the heavens, not in the world around him, but within him. He came to himself. This is the turning point, the breaking moment. It wasn't a light from heaven, it wasn't an audible voice, it was the memory. How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? It wasn't just about food, it was about place, about identity, about worth. He didn't just remember the table, he remembered who he was when he was near the Father. And then he decided, I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. But notice this, he wasn't planning to return as a son, he planned to come back as a servant, because in his heart, guilt still shouted louder than mercy. How many times do we do the same? We return to God, afraid, with rehearsed speeches, thinking we need to pay for everything, as if redemption were a contract and not an embrace. If this story is touching your faith, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs to hear this, because many people need to remember that the Father still waits, even when the world has already given up. And write in the comments, have you ever had a moment when you needed to come back? The journey home began with a single step, but he still didn't know what awaited him. He didn't know that the Father had already seen him long before. Because divine mercy doesn't begin when we ask for it. It's already moving while we're still far off. The prodigal son rehearsed his confession, every sentence, every pause, but he didn't know that the Father doesn't listen to speeches. The Father listens to broken hearts, and as he returned in silence through dust and shame, the Father was already standing. The road was long, not just in distance, but in the invisible weight each step carried. The prodigal son walked barefoot, his feet burning on the dry ground, with sweat mixed with dust staining his skin. Every step seemed to drag years of failure behind it. Each advance brought back memories he'd rather forget. The sky felt still, the wind non-existent. Only the sound of his own footsteps and the pounding of his thoughts echoed in his mind. He tried to rehearse the confession once again, repeating the words he had crafted among the pigs, trying to memorize every pause, every excuse, every line that might make the burden feel lighter. But with each attempt, shame scrambled everything. His heart raced, and deep down, a gnawing certainty consumed him. Maybe there was no going back. The cracked earth beneath his feet mirrored the state of his soul, fragmented, dried out, distant from everything that once felt like home. He imagined the Father's reaction. Would he even recognize him? Or had time erased his face from memory? Would the servants block him at the entrance? Would the neighbors point fingers, mock him, reminding everyone just how far he had fallen? With every hill he crossed, the silhouette of the house began to appear on the horizon. Small, distant, but unmistakable. The place where he was born, where he grew up, and from where he had chosen to leave. His heart pounded hard, but not with joy. It was fear. Fear of not being accepted, fear of a look of reproach, fear of the silence that might greet him when he crossed the gate. The dust rose with his hurried, clumsy steps. His feet ached, his stomach remained empty, but it was his soul that screamed the loudest. He picked up his pace, as if trying to shorten the suffering of that wait. Memories came in fast waves, the smell of freshly baked bread on childhood mornings, the sound of the Father's voice calling his name on feast days, the warmth of nights around the fire. But along with the good memories came the scars of his fall, the waste, the loneliness, the hunger, and the stare of the pigs, indifferent and cruel. Sweat ran down his face, and for a moment, he thought about stopping, taking a deep breath, delaying that moment just a little longer. But the distance was now too short to turn back. Not now. In his mind, the road home would be long, painful, and maybe pointless. With every meter conquered, the image of the house grew larger in his view. Now he could already distinguish the walls, the gate, and figures in the distance, servants, workers, or the Father himself. He slowed his pace. Fear tightened its grip. His hands trembled. He tried, one last time, to arrange the words in his head. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy." But at that very instant, something happened. There, up ahead, at the top of the road, a figure moved. The son froze. His heart pounded differently now. For a second, he thought he was imagining it. But no, it wasn't an illusion. Someone was running toward him, and in that moment, time seemed to stop, because everything he feared the most was about to be answered. But the answer would come in a way he could never have imagined. He still couldn't see the house, but the father already saw him from afar. There was no way to predict what awaited him. The prodigal son was returning, covered in dust and shame, his heart squeezed between repentance and fear. Perhaps he imagined a closed gate, a servant at the entrance, a heavy silence forcing him to pay for the pain he had caused. But Jesus, in telling this story, shattered every human expectation. He says, "But while he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion." Luke 15:20. The father didn't just see him, he ran. That was unthinkable. In Jewish culture, a man of status would never run. Lifting his tunic and exposing his feet was undignified, almost scandalous. But divine mercy doesn't follow etiquette. It breaks through convention to reach those who no longer believe in a way back. The text continues, "And ran and fell on his neck and kissed him." Before any words, before the son could say what he had rehearsed, came the embrace, came the kiss, came the silent forgiveness. The son began his speech. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no more worthy to be called your son." But the father didn't let him finish. He interrupted. He didn't respond to the guilt, he responded to the broken heart. And then he gave a command to the servants, "Bring forth the best robe and put it on him." The best, not just any robe, the one kept for moments of honor, the one that identified position and belonging. Put a ring on his hand. The ring symbolized authority. It was the family seal, the sign that he was returning as a son, not as a servant. And shoes on his feet, because slaves walked barefoot, but sons wore sandals. It was more than a gift. It was a declaration. "You belong to me." Every gesture from the father revealed a truth the religious audience listening to Jesus never expected. Heaven does not punish the repentant. Heaven runs to embrace them, and the celebration began. The father said, "Bring here the fattened calf and kill it. Let us eat and be merry." That calf was reserved for exceptional celebrations, the most awaited day, the most significant occasion. And now the reason was this: "For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." Luke 15:24. It wasn't just a physical return, it was a spiritual resurrection. The son who had fallen was restored. The one who had left was found. The one who had wasted everything now received everything back. But something even deeper was happening there. The restoration wasn't silent. It was public. Servants saw it. Neighbors heard it. The whole house witnessed it. Because when God redeems, He doesn't hide it. He exalts the repentant so the world may know redemption is real. The son, now dressed wearing sandals with a ring on his finger, still barely understood it all. Because sometimes spiritual restoration is so immense that the soul needs time to process it. But the father wasn't waiting for him to understand everything. He just wanted him there, back home. The parable could end here. It would be enough to explain the heart of God. But Jesus had more to reveal, because while the music played, while laughter echoed, while the house celebrated the improbable, someone was approaching from outside, someone who never left, but whose heart was also far away. And sometimes pride dresses itself as faithfulness, and distance happens inside obedience. While music filled the house, and the aroma of the fattened calf spread through the air, someone was approaching from the field. The sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange. His steps were firm, mechanical, like someone who for years had followed the same routine, without detours, without questions. It was the older son, the one who never left, the obedient one, the constant one, But on that late afternoon, something broke the cycle of predictability. He stopped when he heard the sound of instruments, laughter, cheerful voices, an unusual commotion he couldn't understand. His heart, used to silent discipline, raced with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. He called one of the servants, giving a serious look. "What's going on?" The servant, visibly excited, answered without hesitation, "Your brother is back, and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are all celebrating because he came back safe and sound." The answer that should have brought relief struck like a blow. The older son's heart hardened. He didn't go in. He stood there frozen, on the threshold between the field and the party, between duty and indignation. Luke records it clearly. He was angry and would not go in. That house, which for years had been a symbol of stability, now seemed like a strange place. He saw servants running, preparing the banquet, voices calling each other to the celebration. And all for whom? For the brother who had left, the same brother who had squandered everything he had received. Revolt began to grow like a flame inside him. While the house celebrated grace, he sank deeper into comparison. The years of hard work, of obedience, of invisible effort, what had they been worth? The father, noticing his absence, did not remain indifferent. He left the house, walked toward him. Just as he had run to the younger son, now he walked toward the older one. But this time, there was no repentant son waiting. There was a wounded son, and full of pride. Before the father could say a word, the older son vented with a mix of hurt and resentment. "All these years I've served you, never disobeyed a single command of yours, and yet you never gave me even a young goat to celebrate with my friends." Every word carried frustration. He saw no love, only effort, no relationship, only performance. His tone rose now with an accusation heavy in the air. "But when this son of yours comes back, who squandered your property with prostitutes, you kill the fattened calf for him." He didn't even say "my brother" anymore, just "this son of yours." The distance between them was deeper than any journey to a distant land. The father listened in silence. Every sentence was an open wound, a cry for recognition, a plea poorly disguised as anger. And then, with the same tenderness of one who still loves even the hardest hearts, the father replied, "Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours." The words were not just comfort. They were a revelation the older son had never considered. What he sought through merit had always been available through grace. The father's presence did not depend on performance, nor did the inheritance. But the older son, so occupied with his self-righteousness, had never noticed. The father continued with a voice firm and filled with compassion. "It was necessary to celebrate and rejoice, because this your brother was dead and is alive again, was lost and is found." It was necessary. The celebration was not an emotional whim. It was the natural response to life that overcame death, to repentance that overcame the fall. Joy was not an optional choice. It was the inevitable reflection of restoration. Inside the house, the music kept playing. The banquet was ready. And there, outside, a father and a son stood before a decision that only he could make. The celebration continued. Jesus ends the story but doesn't close the door. The parable doesn't tell us if the older brother entered the celebration. There's no final embrace, no visible reconciliation. What there is silence. And that silence has a purpose. The story of the prodigal son wasn't told just to be remembered. It was told to be chosen. In every generation, in every home, in every heart, this parable repeats itself. Children who leave, children who stay and harden their hearts, fathers who love and wait. But in this case, the father represents something greater. He's not just a family figure, he is the living revelation of God himself, a God who sees from afar, who doesn't demand explanations, who runs toward the repentant, who not only forgives, but restores. He doesn't bargain with love, he offers it, without discount. without condition, because what's at stake isn't just the return, it's the reconnection of identity. The prodigal son doesn't come back as a servant, he returns as a son. And that says everything about who God is. Throughout the Bible, God is described as just, holy, and sovereign. But in this parable, he appears as the father who waits, who watches the road, who recognizes from afar the silhouette of the broken, and who runs, even when everyone else thinks he should punish. This is the God who waits on the road, not with a rod, but with a robe, not with accusation, but with redemption. If this story touched your heart, comment below which part spoke to you the most. Share it with someone who needs to know there's still a place at the table. Like this video and subscribe to the channel if you believe redemption still transforms lives. The story of the prodigal son ends with a celebration, but it also ends with a choice. A choice Jesus leaves to the listener. A choice that now is yours. Who do you identify with? With the one who went too far and needs to come back? Or with the one who's always been close but never learned to rejoice in someone else's spiritual restoration? The table is still set. The ring is still being offered. The Father is still watching the road. And when you rise, even without strength, even without words, even covered in the dust of your fall, He will still run.